Oppenheimer is out in theaters, the latest film from Christopher Nolan, based on a book called American Prometheus. The film stars Cillian Murphy, Emily Blunt, Robert Downey Jr., Matt Damon, Florence Pugh, and dozens of other great actors, too many to list all of them. Shot exclusively on IMAX film by Hoyte van Hoytema, without a single instance of CGI being used. All of the special effects were apparently done practically in camera with the help of miniatures, slow motion and high resolution photography, and in some cases compositing different images together to create a certain effect. The film tells the story of J. Robert Oppenheimer, the American physicist who is considered the father of the atomic bomb. I stress this, it's the story of Oppenheimer himself, not the bomb, which I think has been surprising to some people, especially after the trailer, who perhaps thought that the movie would put more focus on just the Manhattan Project. It doesn't. What it does instead is it splits the story into two intertwined sets of flashbacks. The first set, subtitled Fission and shot in color, is Oppenheimer being questioned by a government committee as they're trying to revoke his security clearance way after the war, and he's recalling what happened before. And the second set is called Fusion, and this is Louis Strauss, played by Robert Downey Jr., also being questioned by a different committee before they confirm him as someone important in the US government. Can't remember the exact position. And this part is in black and white. And it's kind of like a little bit like in The Prestige, where we saw the story unfold from the perspective of two opposing characters, and we would just flip back and forth between present and past, between one guy's perspective and the other one's, and change timelines and move around in the story. It's not the easiest narrative structure to follow. It requires you to be focused on what's going on in order to fully grasp it, especially as a lot of the nuance surrounding what happened after the war can be a bit complicated. It gets political at one point. But for me personally, I think that the movie does a good job of explaining all of this, even if I didn't know a lot of the details beforehand, before going into it. Aside from this structure, it also has the duality of thematically dealing on the one hand with the bomb itself, and then afterwards with Oppenheimer the person and his sort of stance on atomic weaponry, his doubts and his regrets after the fact. Overall, I like the film. I think it's a competent historical drama / biopic. It tells an interesting story and does it in an interesting way. It is very good at building tension, especially in the sequence leading up to the Trinity test. I thought that was possibly one of the better scenes in the film. But also afterwards, I think that the sound design is used to great effect to help put us in Oppenheimer's shoes and let us experience what he was experiencing, again, especially post factum. I loved the performances. I think Cillian Murphy is fantastic, especially at playing Oppenheimer when he starts experiencing these doubts and regretting his impact on the war and humanity as a whole. He has that 1,000-yard stare, nailed to perfection, haunting eyes, looking into abyss. Just look at his face in the trailer. You'll know what I'm talking about. I like Robert Downey Jr. I like Matt Damon. I think that Emily Blunt is she has little to work with, less than I hoped for, but she manages to shine very brightly, especially in the scene where she's being interrogated by the committee as well. Just fantastic screen presence right there. Also, I really liked Benny Safdie of the Safdie brothers. I think in a very wide cast of many people playing many characters, he manages to somehow stand out as memorable, interesting, and unique. And he doesn't even seem to be doing a lot of flashy acting. Again, he just has an interesting screen presence. I like the score and some of the editing choices which tap into Oppenheimer's state of mind. I don't want to spoil anything, but there are a couple of creative sequences which involve editing, and obviously the production design is impeccable as usual for Nolan, who likes to do things practically in camera without the crutch of CGI, and that really shows. The film has a great sort of texture to it. I also enjoyed that the film doesn't try to portray Oppenheimer as the sole genius that came up with everything. On the contrary, he relies on the other scientists in many different areas, and he himself tends to be wrong about things, and only through collaboration do they make progress. That is something that I think many biopics of brilliant people often get wrong. So I was happy to see that here, and obviously that's just pertaining to the science itself. Obviously, in the wider sort of political landscape, he's even more a fish out of water, and he makes even more mistakes. However, having said all of that, I want to say one thing from the sort of opposite direction. As much as the Trinity test is a visually impressive sequence, especially in IMAX, which is the format I saw the film in, I've come to expect a certain kind of spectacle from Christopher Nolan, from a Christopher Nolan film. Whenever he releases a new one, I go to an IMAX theater because I know it will be an amazing experience there. I still vividly remember really enjoying Tenet, even though upon later examination, I thought that the movie wasn't as strong as I initially thought it was, but it was just so overwhelmingly cool. It felt like a carnival ride. Similarly with Dunkirk, which didn't lose as much in my eyes after the fact, but just watching it in IMAX, I still vividly remember the overwhelming sound design of the planes just bombing at me. I felt like I was there on the beaches, and obviously all of his previous films, Interstellar, Inception, the Dark Knight trilogy, you could say similar things about them. And with Oppenheimer, I think I didn't quite get that experience to the same level. Aside from the bomb, there is a lack of that spectacle, and it made me think about two things. One, maybe shooting an entire film in IMAX format was a bit of a waste of it in this case, because it isn't really that much noticeably more impressive when 80% of the film is just people talking in rooms. And two, maybe Nolan was not the best director that I would see for this type of film. What I mean is, he does do a good job. The movie is well made, but him directing a historical biopic like this without much action is a little bit like renting a Ferrari and just taking it out to get groceries. Yes, you can do that. You will be able to get your milk and potatoes, but you could have done that in a regular car too. And this particular car, this Ferrari, can do so much more, and you would want to use it to its fullest potential. And similarly, I like to see Christopher Nolan use his fullest potential, which I don't necessarily think he's doing here. I'd rather see the same script be directed by someone like David Fincher or Steven Spielberg, whose style I think would fit the topic more. With Nolan, I want that huge spectacle. I want him to maybe go into some science fiction elements. I want him to do an impressive action film that pushes the limits and knocks me off my feet in IMAX. So as much as he doesn't necessarily do anything wrong with Oppenheimer, I just think he could have done something more exciting instead. Which is maybe a strange criticism to have, but here we are. I did think about it. I thought it might be an interesting point to make. In any case, I don't really have anything else to complain about other than the fact that maybe it is a bit too long of a film at 3 hours of runtime. But I do get that it wanted to really explore the stuff that followed the Manhattan Project rather than just focus on that. I think it's a similar case to The Irishman, actually, where a lot of people complained about the runtime and especially about the final act being unnecessary, where in reality the final act of that film was the whole point. And I think to an extent the final act is also the point of this film. It shows how, despite turning around his views on the atomic weaponry, Oppenheimer was ultimately unjustly denied the tools needed to speak his mind and to continue influencing policy. And as a result, he had to live with his failure, as weird as it sounds, with his regrets, which, you know, the brilliant ending of the film really drives home in a very powerful way. Nolan does have a knack for amazing endings, and this film is no exception on that front. So all in all, good film, not much to complain about other than the fact that it isn't quite the amusement park ride that Nolan usually takes his viewers on.